As a film blogger who mainly focuses on zombie movies, I suddenly realized that since World War Z, Dawn of the Dead, and Train to Busan were released, it's been a long time since I've seen a zombie movie that was truly impressive. Although many zombie movies have been released in recent years, they have all been, without exception, terrible. Either the plot is completely illogical, or the special effects are cheap. They're basically unwatchable. Perhaps due to the limitations of the genre, it's become difficult for zombie movies to break new ground. No matter how they're filmed, it's always the same old formula. But it's worth mentioning. This Spanish zombie film released at the end of 2024, Apocalypse, The Final Stand, managed to create something uniquely brilliant within the same framework. Whether it's the storyline, special effects, or makeup, it has commendable aspects. You could say that, by comparison, it's definitely the best zombie movie in recent years. The story starts with high intensity. A virus called TSJ is quietly spreading across the globe. The news began to report on it extensively, but the protagonist, Manel, missed this important news. Just by getting up to use the restroom, the virus causes the infected to mutate. Their terrifying appearance is like that of bloodthirsty zombies. Manel, having missed the news, went out as usual, but he noticed there were an unusual number of ambulances today. Arriving at the supermarket, he saw everyone frantically grabbing supplies. Although Manel had his doubts, he didn't think much of it. He just bought a few things and returned home. It wasn't until that night, when his sister video called him, that he finally understood what was happening. It turned out his brother-in-law is a military officer, so he knew more inside information. His superiors were planning to transfer them to the Canary Islands, where the military had established a safe zone. She wanted her brother to leave with them too. He should go to the airport first thing in the morning and take the earliest flight. Clearly, the situation was more serious than the news reported. Following his sister's instructions, Manel didn't dare to delay. The next morning, he drove to the airport early. As soon as he stepped out, he saw his neighbors also anxiously packing their bags, getting ready to leave. This made Manel feel uneasy. He reached the airport as quickly as he could. However, as he was about to queue for boarding with his ticket, something unexpected happened. All flights were suddenly canceled. Then, everyone's phone received a disaster alert. People instantly panicked. Some even forced their way through the ticket gate. Just then, Manel received a call from his sister. She told him the virus was completely out of control. For safety reasons, the government had closed the airspace. For now, Manel could only return home and wait until they had more information. Unexpectedly, just as he hung up, a commotion broke out in the crowd. An agitated man actually snatched a guard's gun. The whole terminal instantly descended into chaos. Manel took the opportunity to leave the scene, but as he was driving back, he found the highway was completely gridlocked. People were scrambling to evacuate the city. Seeing that the traffic wasn't moving at all, Manel, sensing trouble, had to park his car on the roadside. He then took his luggage and started walking home. He walked until nightfall, finally arriving at his apartment building. But he saw his neighbor's door sealed shut with plastic sheeting. A large number of soldiers were also standing guard, prohibiting anyone from getting close. Just as Manel was about to ask what happened, he saw hazmat-suited personnel escorting his neighbor out of the house. But his neighbor looked like a crazed beast, as if he could break free at any moment. Filled with fear, Manel returned to his home. He spent a terrifying night until the next morning. He finally received another call from his sister, but she brought bad news. The authorities would not be opening the airspace anytime soon. And to prevent the virus from spreading further, they were establishing quarantine zones. They were preparing to enforce a mandatory quarantine for everyone. The quarantine order had already been issued. Soldiers would soon be coming door to door. But his sister urged Manel not to get on the transport, because the more people gathered, the higher the risk of infection. It was safer to stay at home. She and her husband would find a way to get him. Afterward, Manel saw through short videos that other cities were also in a state of chaos. Then, a warning was issued on TV. The country had declared a state of emergency. People were warned not to go out unless absolutely necessary. But realizing he didn't have much food at home, and not knowing when he'd be able to leave, Manel had to risk going to the supermarket for supplies. But when he got there, he was stunned. The shelves had already been picked clean. Manel managed to find a piece of flatbread on the floor, but an old man snatched it away the next second. In the current situation, he couldn't be picky. He had to resort to packing unwanted cat and dog food. Just as he managed to fill his backpack and was about to leave, he suddenly saw a police officer with an injured arm running over in a panic. He then locked himself inside the supermarket. Then, screams came from nearby. Someone was running for their life, seemingly fleeing from something terrifying. As Manel wondered what was happening, another officer was tackled to the ground by a crazed man, who took a vicious bite out of his neck. Manel grabbed a mop and was about to help, but he was frozen in fear by the man's ferocious appearance. Clearly, the man was infected with the virus. Seeing the man lunge towards him, Manel just stood there, stunned. Luckily, at the critical moment, the first officer shot the zombie dead. But before he could recover from the shock, the officer inside the supermarket also began to mutate. Unaware of the danger, Manel still wanted to help. But the officer, knowing his fate, fired a shot to stop him from getting closer. Helpless, Manel could only leave. Just as he left, the officer turned the gun on himself. Back home, Manel immediately drew the curtains and reinforced his doors and windows to prevent any zombie attacks. That night, the military began evacuating civilians. using drones to broadcast messages in the neighborhood. Anyone who refused to leave would face legal consequences. Mantle hid in his room, watching secretly. He saw his neighbors being loaded onto buses one by one. He thought he had escaped notice. But the next second, his doorbell rang. Mantle didn't dare make a sound. After trying the door and failing, the person outside soon left. He had narrowly avoided the soldier's search, and this saved his life. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. The streets were a mess. Not a soul could be seen. The entire city was desolate, like a ghost town, and Mantle still hadn't heard from his sister. He had even lost contact with her due to the lack of signal. To make matters worse, his food supply had run out, so he had to risk going out to find supplies. Because he had no transportation, Mantle could only try his luck within the neighborhood. But he searched several apartments and found no food at all. Until he opened the next door, he found another survivor inside. No audio. Due to his mobility issues, the old man didn't make it onto the bus. Learning that Mantle was worried about food, the old man immediately took him to the window. Out of boredom, he sat there every day looking out. So he knew exactly which apartments had stockpiled food. And because of the military evacuation, it was likely they hadn't finished it all. Sure enough, with the old man's guidance, Mantle started to find some success. He also unexpectedly found a motorcycle, which greatly increased the efficiency of his search for food. But to avoid encountering zombies, Mantle didn't dare to go too far. He still could only search around the neighborhood. However, the food he found in the complex was enough for them to live on for a while. However, Mantle soon realized that this wasn't a long-term solution. The food would eventually run out. Just as Mantle was worrying about this, that night, the old man told him over the walkie-talkie that he had heard some good news on the radio. Someone was organizing survivors to go to the Canary Islands, and they even gave the specific coordinates. It was at the Arousa estuary. Hearing this, Mantle didn't hesitate. He immediately decided to go to the docks the next morning. He had a small yacht at the docks. They could take the yacht to the Arousa estuary. But the old man on the other end was worried. After all, even going out onto the street was a problem for him, let alone a long journey. Mantle understood his concern, so he immediately promised he wouldn't leave him behind. Finally, after his repeated persuasion, the old man agreed to go with him. However, when Mantle packed his bags the next day and went to the old man's house to pick him up, he found him lying in bed, having already stopped breathing, unable to move easily, and not wanting to be a burden to the kind young man. He had chosen to end his life with medication. Having lost his only companion in the apocalypse, Mantle left the room, dejected. Unexpectedly, a zombie suddenly rushed out and tackled him. If it weren't for the Rolex on his wrist, Mantle would have been in grave danger. Seeing a car nearby, he decisively opened its door and slammed it into the zombie. By trapping the zombie's hair in the car door, Mantle managed to escape. But just as he took a few steps away, the zombie tore off its own scalp to break free and charged at Mantle again. Luckily, there was a spear gun on the grass. Mantle quickly grabbed it, loaded a spear, and aimed at the zombie. The appearance of a zombie nearby meant the area was no longer safe. Mantle didn't dare to delay. He immediately got on his motorcycle and rushed to the docks. On the way, he passed a military checkpoint. Below it was the quarantine zone they had established. It was in a state of chaos, clearly having fallen long ago. Mantle had to take a side road, but he encountered a large horde of zombies in the woods. Under the zombies' frantic pursuit, he passed a campsite. No one there had been spared. They had all turned into zombies. The loud noise drew them out. Mantle continued to race along the path. Suddenly, a pile of dead bodies appeared in the middle of the road. It startled him, and he slammed on the brakes, causing him to fall. Ignoring the pain, he quickly picked up the motorcycle to continue his escape. But the engine malfunctioned. It wouldn't start. As the horde got closer, Mantle had to abandon the bike and run. After sprinting through a forest, he finally reached the docks. He managed to close the gate just before the horde caught up, shutting them out. But to Mantle's surprise, there wasn't a single boat at the entire dock. Even his own yacht was gone. Just as Mantle was despairing, he suddenly spotted what looked like a small boat in the distance. He decisively dove into the water and swam to the boat to check it out. But its engine wouldn't start either. Fortunately, the speedboat next to it was still usable. Mantle immediately drives the speedboat to escape. On the way, he leaves a message for his sister, saying he has already left home and is currently heading to the Arousa estuary, trying to find a way to meet up with them. He thought he could reach his destination without any trouble. But not long after setting off, the speedboat broke down. Just as he was despairing, a ship suddenly appeared ahead. Seeing it, Mantle quickly shouted for help. Soon, 3 heavily armed, burly men arrived. But he couldn't understand a word they were saying. Although Mantle was a bit worried, right now he had no choice but to go with them. Afterwards, he was taken to a cargo ship. After eating the food they provided, the captain appeared before him. It turned out they were a group of Russians. One of them could speak Spanish. The man first asked Mantle if he was a local. After getting confirmation that he was, he then asked about Mantle's profession. Mantle immediately said he was a lawyer. The man then turned and said something to the captain, who immediately left. It turned out the man had lied, saying Mantle was an engineer. Because in a zombie-infested apocalypse, being a lawyer is the most useless profession. Only engineers, scientists, and doctors are valued. And this man was not only fluent in Russian and Spanish, he was also an excellent pilot. After taking Mantle to a room, the pilot left. And not long after he left, Mantle saw several survivors on a hovercraft calling for help through the window. But the next morning, when Mantle went on deck, he didn't see the survivors from last night. He asked the pilot, but the pilot denied seeing any survivors and told him not to meddle. However, Mantle then saw the hovercraft on the cargo ship. Two men were rummaging through a large pile of luggage for useful items. Inside the ship's cabin, he saw a man carrying several plates out of the cargo hold. Another man mysteriously locked the cargo hold door tightly. It seemed there was some dark secret hidden inside. With questions in his mind, Mantle found the pilot again. He demanded to know if they had locked up last night's survivors. But the pilot just tried to change the subject. It seemed Mantle's guess was correct. These people were not good men. But he could also see that the pilot wasn't a bad person, just forced to work with them. Mantle said he knew a hospital had a plane. They could fly it to a safe zone. Unexpectedly, their conversation was overheard by one of the crew. Luckily, he didn't understand Spanish, and the pilot managed to fool him with a few words. After the man left, the pilot warned Mantle, "If you want to live, just stay quiet." Seeing the pilot had no intention of leaving, Mantle had to find a way to escape on his own. He grabbed his luggage and quietly slipped out of the room. But as he passed the cargo hold, he couldn't resist going down. Just as he suspected, two survivors were tied up inside. Kind-hearted Mantle chose to save them, but one of them was extremely agitated. As soon as he was untied, he tried to rush out. As a result, he was spotted by a guard. A burst of gunfire took him down, and Mantle was dragged into the mess. Just then, the pilot arrived, hearing the noise. He tried to plead for Mantle, but the guard wasn't going to let him go. Unexpectedly, the pilot suddenly fought back, grappling with the guard. Meanwhile, Mantle just stood there watching. It wasn't until the pilot knocked the guard down. Now, the pilot had no choice but to leave with Mantle. He then took Mantle and the other survivor to a speedboat. But as soon as they started the engine, other guards spotted them. That survivor was shot and killed on the spot. Seeing this, Mantle quickly sped away. But under the guards' heavy fire, the pilot was accidentally shot in the shoulder. Luckily, his life wasn't in danger. The two managed to escape to the shore. Then, Mantle found a car with the injured pilot. He immediately rushed to the hospital, planning to fly the plane to the Canary Islands, and also to treat the pilot's wound. They passed through the devastated city center, and finally reached their destination. But unfortunately, not only did Mantle not see the plane, he found himself in danger again. A zombie suddenly appeared, and jumped onto the windshield. In a panic, Mantle quickly swerved the wheel, trying to throw the zombie off the car with momentum. But the zombie clung to the hood like glue. Seeing an obstacle ahead, Mantle had to slam on the brakes. This finally threw the zombie off. He then seized the opportunity to get out of the car, and took out the zombie with his submachine gun. However, the gunshot attracted more zombies. Without hesitation, Mantle opened fire again. The zombies were instantly cleared out, but the submachine gun was out of ammo. With no other choice, Mantle could only help the pilot into the hospital, planning to treat his wound first. But just as he settled him on a hospital bed and was looking for medicine and surgical tools, he suddenly heard someone talking upstairs. Could there be other survivors in the hospital? Mantle followed the sound to a ventilation duct opening. He realized it was coming from inside. He quickly shouted out, saying he had an injured companion in the operating room who urgently needed help. The person responded immediately, but at the same time, a zombie also responded. But just as he dealt with that problem, a large group of zombies appeared in the hallway. Mantle had no choice but to run. He sprinted all the way back to the operating room. But strangely, the pilot was gone from the bed. Just as he stood there confused, a nearby passage suddenly opened. A survivor told him to hurry over. A second before the zombies broke through the door, Mantle managed to slip inside just in time. It turned out the pilot had been saved by the girl. The area they were in was very safe, with no zombies. And besides the girl, there was another woman and 3 children. It's hard to imagine they had managed to live here for over half a month. Afterwards, with the help of the 2 women, the bullet was successfully removed from the pilot. Learning the reason they came, the girl immediately took Mantle to the roof. Unexpectedly, there was another plane in the square behind the building, but the area outside the fence was swarming with zombies. Without weapons, it would be difficult to get to the plane. Actually, they also wanted to leave, as their remaining food was running low. But for 2 women with 3 children, it was too dangerous, so they could only hide in the hospital. Until now. The next day, Mantle went to the roof again. Looking at the plane so close below, he was thinking about how to get inside the fence, when he suddenly heard gunshots from downstairs. Mantle followed the sound to check, and found it was the thugs from the cargo ship. It seemed they were looking for supplies. What an unfortunate reunion. He quickly told the others. The situation was urgent. They had to leave earlier than planned. But as soon as they opened a door, a zombie rushed in and bit the woman. Seeing this, Mantle quickly pulled the zombie off. With the girl's help, they managed to kill it. Unfortunately, the woman was already infected. She knew she was about to turn, so she entrusted her children to the girl. Then she chose to turn and walk away alone. The others had no choice. They could only continue on with heavy hearts. But on the way to the square, Zombies were everywhere. The group was in danger again. They had to move carefully through the area, trying to avoid being seen. The pilot and the girl led the way. Two children followed closely behind them. They all made it to the other side safely. But when it was Manil's and the last child's turn, an accident happened. A scream. The scream instantly alerted all the zombies. Manil quickly grabbed the child and hid in a cabinet. The girl was helpless. She had to close the door to protect herself. Just as the cabinet door was about to be broken through by zombies, a barrage of gunfire suddenly rang out outside. All the zombies were instantly killed. Manil carefully pushed open the cabinet door. He found that it was the thugs who had unintentionally saved him while they were scavenging, and they hadn't noticed anyone was there. After the thugs left, Manil came out to regroup with the others. However, the path ahead was even more dangerous. Although it was a short distance, it was a life-or-death journey. How could they cross the horde and get into the fence? Looking at the mobile barricades by the wall, Manil instantly had an idea. They arranged the barricades in a circle and then pushed their way out. This way, they could not only fend off zombie attacks, but also use the wheels to move forward slowly. But as the zombies began to attack, their situation became perilous. Manil and the girl had to desperately kill zombies trying to climb over the barricade. The pilot struggled to keep pushing the barricade forward. They finally reached the gate of the fence. They used the barricade to block the zombies outside. The girl broke the chain with an axe. The others quickly got on the plane. The last two also boarded after closing the gate. And a few zombies climbed over the fence and got in. Seeing this, Manil had to rush forward to buy time. Finally, after some work from the pilot, the plane's propeller started spinning. The thugs arrived, attracted by the noise. Using their superior firepower as cover, the group quickly stormed the fence and threatened the people on the plane with guns to get off if they fell into their hands. The pilot immediately gave Manil a look. Manil understood instantly. He decisively turned and broke open the fence, letting all the zombies outside in. While using the fence for protection, they also used the zombies to kill all the thugs. Seeing the zombies closing in, the pilot quickly lifted the helicopter into the air. As Manil fought his way out with an axe, the girl immediately dropped a ladder. Manil quickly grabbed the ladder. The group of 5 finally escaped. Following their original plan, they flew the plane towards the Canary Islands. And as they got closer to their destination, Manil's phone got a signal. The first thing he did was call his sister. He happily told her he was about to arrive at the Canary Islands. However, what she said plunged them back into despair.
¡No vengas a Canarias! ¡Da la vuelta! ¡Da la vuelta! ¡No vengas! ¡Por favor, no vengas a Canarias!
Unexpectedly, just as she finished speaking, 2 fighter jets flew past overhead. Seeing this, everyone instantly had a bad feeling. It was obvious. The so-called safe zone was no longer safe. Like most zombie movies, the ending of Apocalypse also left a cliffhanger. It's unclear if there will be a sequel. If this had been released over a decade ago, this zombie movie would definitely be a classic. But we've seen this kind of plot many times, which is why it doesn't stand out that much. However, what I want to say is, for the current movie market, we're lucky to have something to watch at all. Don't ask for too much. After all, making this type of movie isn't very profitable. No big-shot investor is going to spend a lot of money on it. However, the upcoming sequel to World War Z is still something to look forward to. That's all for this video. Thanks to all my fans for watching. We'll see you next time with more great content.